Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Quest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 225 and we're covering Apostolicum Exercitatum 30 on beginning apostolic formation in schools among the young. So if you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about formation of lay apostles is important and should work with all aspects of the person, not just the narrow apostolate formation. Today we're continuing this chapter 6 on formation of the apostolate, and we're talking about formation of young people and that we need to form young Catholics for the apostolate, and no area of their formation should ignore this important aspect, such as their parents forming them, schools forming them, parishes forming them, etc. So that's really what we're going to cover, the formation of young people for the apostolate. Paragraph 30 has 5 subparagraphs, which we're going to read each individually. A is on formation of the apostolate should start young, basic principle. B is on families and parishes should form kids for the apostolate. C is on schools should teach apostolate, and we need to take extra care for those who are not in Catholic schools because they're going to miss that, and we need to find ways to supplement it elsewhere. D, lay groups or associations must also form young people in the apostolate. And then E, form for apostolates in professional life, even when young, which is kind of a challenge there, and also as they get into those professional careers. So let's begin with 30A. A, the training for the apostolate should start with children's earliest education. In a special way, however, adolescents and young persons should be initiated in the apostolate and imbued with its spirit. This formation must be perfected throughout their whole life and keep with the demands of the new responsibilities. It is evident, therefore, that those who have an obligation to provide a Christian education also have the duty of providing formation for the apostolate. As I've noted above, even kids are called to be apostles. They need formation starting then. A lot of times it's not just, the formation is just being there with their parents. I always see it as a really beneficial thing when you see a young person standing there helping out their parents, even if they're not doing much in the apostolate, they're seeing their parents, they're modeled after their parents. So if they see their parents, say, cooking, serving food for the homeless, or they see their parents preparing things for catechesis, or they see their parents fighting for against abortion, things like that, they are moved by that. And they need this formation starting when they're young like that. It can't end there. Obviously, it's going to grow as their maturity grows. Even among my niece and nephews, who there's about a 10-year difference. It's obviously going to be very different for the one who's 10 years older than the other one, because they're all the oldest one's just in middle school. But those kind of things, there are those kind of differences. And we need to build it on that. And there's a duty in those who are called to form them, because parents and teachers are called to form young people, and priests and everyone else and catechists and those different people, and all of them have a duty to form them in the apostolate. This is a part of a whole life. This is something that every single person, even little kids, are called to do. Now, obviously, as I noted, little kids are going to do something much less. Their thing is going to be standing there beside mom while mom serves the homeless, or standing there beside mom while mom collects money for the poor after Mass, or something along those lines, right? So let's move on to 30B. Families and parishes should form kids for the apostolate. Let's read it. B. In the family, parents have the task of training their children from childhood on to recognize God's love for all men. By example especially, they should teach them little by little to be solicitous for the material and spiritual needs of their neighbor. The whole family in its common life then should be a sort of apprenticeship for the apostolate. Children must be educated too in such fashion that, transcending the family circle, they may open their minds to both ecclesiastical and temporal communities. They should be involved in local community of the parish, that they will acquire a consciousness of being living and active members of the people of God. Priests should focus their attention on the formation of the laity for the apostolate in their catechesis, their ministry of the word, the direction of souls, and in the other pastoral services. So as we can do this paragraph, just a reminder, when it talks about ecclesial and temporal communities here, ecclesiastical refers to the church, and temporal would refer to the world, the secular. So it means both your local community, like your town, and your parish, in a practical matter. For most kids, it's that kind of level. Maybe it's your dad's workplace too, or something. If the kids are invited to events there. So Here, parents are the primary educators. We covered that in Gravissimus Educationis. But if they're educating their kids, this education must include the apostolate. It is not that we just say, hey, here's what you believe, here's how to pray. No. We also need to include that how they go out and serve, how they go out and be apostles. And they, as I noticed, most of all by care, by example. That's going to be how they're first form them. And then this is kind of this apprenticeship. They are apprentices to their parents. And eventually, if their parents are doing that, eventually they'll be able to go and do that too. It's great when you see a parent who's doing something at the back of church, collecting money or signing up people for some kind of ministry or something like that. There's a little apostolate and their kids with them. And one year the kids just kind of hiding there behind the table. And the next year the kids actually actively help them out. How do they do that? Well, they saw mom or dad do it a bunch of times. Like, okay, I get the hang of this. I can help mom and dad out. And it's outside the family as well. So it talks about the parish, talks about the priest, and our need as priests to make sure we talk to young people, we include apostolate as part of the formation, not just learn the faith. So moving on to paragraph 30C, it talks about schools, and they should teach apostolate. We need to take extra care with those not in Catholic school as well. So let's read it. C. Schools, colleges, and other Catholic educational institutions also have the duty to develop a Catholic sense and an apostolic activity in young persons. If young people lack this formation, either because they do not attend these schools or because of other reasons, all the more should parents, pastors of souls, and apostolic organizations attend to it. Teachers and educators, on the other hand, who carry on a distinguished form of the apostolate of the laity by the vocation office, should be equipped with the learning and pedagogical skill that are needed for imparting such education effectively. So here, schools, Catholic schools, must teach the apostolate. It's not some nice addition. It's not an additional thing. Oh, it's nice. We do want to do a little bit of service here and there. No. And a lot of this is developing this sense. So students want to serve. Students want to do apostolate. And this is an important part of teaching the apostolate. Teachers have a great lay apostolate teaching students. I know, I'd have to start counting. I know many people who've done this apostolate and things like that, right? And then we must seek out those outside of Catholic schools because they're going to get this formation we're giving those in Catholic schools. But we shouldn't say, oh, their parents didn't send them to Catholic school, therefore no. A lot of times there might not be a Catholic school in the town, so it's a super long drive, or they might not be able to afford all these different things, and that should not be an obstacle. So, moving on to 30D, talking about lay groups or associations must form young people in the apostolate. So let's read it. Likewise, lay groups and associations dedicated to the apostolate and other supernatural goals should carefully and assiduously promote formation of the apostolate and keep it with their purpose and condition. Frequently, these groups are the ordinary vehicle for harmonious formation for the apostolate, inasmuch as they provide doctrinal, spiritual, and practical formation. Their members meet in small groups with the associates or friends, examine the methods and results of the apostolic activity, and compare their daily life with the way of the life with the gospel. So we have these lay apostolates who are often good, lay groups. There's a lot of movements, associations. They have different spirits. I know people who are involved in charismatic ones. I am definitely not involved in charismatic ones. I've been to charismatic things a few times, realized it's not my call. It's great that they do it, not mine. And I know for myself, when I was a religious brother, I was assigned to youth ministry, and I was doing a lot with ECYD members, so mainly middle school people who are associated, a year at a time related to the Regnum Christi movement. And we were training them in the apostolate. We were training them, hey, how do we go into apostolate? How do we serve? How are we able to do that? And we would actually, have the clubs do some kind of apostolate at different times. Obviously, it wouldn't be constantly, but it would be a part of the monthly or bi-monthly activity where we'd go out one night, and instead of having the normal club meeting, we go out and do apostolate. And that's a great thing to do. And it's also great that these often meet in small groups. These small groups are often much more able to be customized, personalized, and they're often the right size to do apostolates together. A lot of times apostolates, when you have 10, 12, it's a very good number for a lot of apostolates that young people, middle school, elementary school can do. 30, 40 is often too many for doing a lot of apostolates, like you might have in a Catholic school. So, moving on to our last subparagraph, 30E is about forming apostolate in the professional life. So forming these young people to be professionals who do apostolate. Let's read it. E. Formation of this type must be so organized that it takes into account the whole lay apostolate, which must be carried out not only among the organized groups themselves, but also in all circumstances throughout one's whole life. especially one's professional and social life. Indeed, everyone should diligently prepare himself for the apostolate. This preparation being the more urgent in adulthood. For the advance of age brings with it a more open mind, enabling each person to detect more readily the talents with which God has enriched his soul, and to exercise more effectively those charisms which the Holy Spirit has bestowed on him for the good of his brother. So this is pointing out that it doesn't just start at young people and then stop. No, it continues on to their whole life. But one of the interesting things is forming the true apostolate in their professional and social spheres. Most young people are not in their professional spheres. I look at middle schoolers, none of them are engineers or bankers or things like that, even though a decent portion of them will have professional jobs somewhere in those fields, right? And different ones, different professional fields. But how are we training young people for that apostolate? And we need to continue that formation as they get older. It needs to be adapted for their age and their circumstances. And it might be varied a little bit based on their professional area. Their Catholic social doctor is much more important for people who are going to banking and economics and management than it is for other fields. And the same thing for bioethics for doctors. So how are we making sure those people are getting that formation so they're able to bring Jesus into the very specifics of their profession? And that's important. As we get older, we also become more responsible for our own formation. My nephew in second grade is not really responsible for his own formation. His parents, his teacher, much more responsible. But if I'm talking to someone who's 25 years old, they are much more responsible for their own formation. And that's one thing that happens as we get older. And people can better recognize their own personal talents as they get older, what they're really good at, and how they can use that to serve the church. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time month to join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Apostolic Tatum, 31 to 32, on specific formation for some types of apostolate. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan.
Amen.